So today we're talking about our loved ones. And by this point in your life, you may have noticed that while these can be some of the most emotionally supportive relationships, they can also be the most challenging. Those closest to us can trigger us the most, and we tend to have quite contradictory, complex relationships. Because of that, I've noticed a lot of people tend to feel guilty about how they feel towards their loved ones, their parents or their spouse, their children is a good example of when we feel resentment towards them, when we're upset with them, when we feel ashamed of them in certain ways, when we're afraid of them maybe. And we tend to push how we feel to the side, saying, "Oh, I shouldn't really feel that way because I love this person, or I should love this person." And feeling guilty instead, and feeling very trapped with that. And this can actually sort of eat away at the relationship or make it feel less comfortable than it otherwise would do, which is why this is so important. So this is what we're going to be unpacking today. Let me give you a couple of examples first, just to really get clear on what I'm talking about, and then I'll talk about how we can start to give ourselves more space for our emotions and how that's so beneficial, how that helps these relationships. So imagine Sam. Sam's in his mid-30s and he's a successful lawyer by this point, and he loves his dad. His dad was always warm and playful, but his dad was very strict when it came to homework and school and stuff like that. And he made Sam feel like if he didn't do well, he wasn't going to be, he was going to be rejected. That wasn't explicitly said, but that was the implicit vibe. And Sam ended up becoming very perfectionistic, quite workaholic and insecure in himself, always trying to do the best to get that love. And deep down, he really resents his dad because of that. And he kind of can sense that in how they interact. But he feels like instead he shouldn't feel that way. He should feel really grateful because, his dad pushed him to do well, and he should be grateful for that. And so this kind of sense of this debt to his father means that he invalidates that resentment. And we'll get to, the impacts that has later on. A second example, Mansi is, in her early 40s, and she's been married for, 15 years to a husband who she loves. And he's very supportive and he's kind, but they are on opposite ends. Over time, they've diverged as they've each developed on the political spectrum. So she's a bit more progressive. He tends to be a bit more conservative, and he loves a good argument. So she finds herself in these situations at dinner parties and so on, where he's being quite assertive with his views and wanting to get into debates with people. And even with her wanting to kind of win in the debate, he finds it kind of fun. She finds it stressful and is a bit embarrassed really about how assertive he is, and she feels that kind of shame, and she even gets quite upset when he's trying to win and feels like she's not being listened to. But she'll kind of tend to push those to the side because she feels like it's wrong for her to feel that way about him, like he should be able to express himself. Or sometimes she just simply feels afraid of speaking up, like he's going to get mad maybe, or something like that. And these are examples of how over time, with these emotions of resentment or shame or fear can build up, and you can see how the consequences of this over time is that the emotions, the real authentic emotions that we feel, we can't push them away forever, and they start coming out sideways. So Sam, in his relationship with his dad, maybe he starts to snap at his dad in different situations. Like that resentment just comes out sideways. There's these little snipes he makes to try to get one over on him that comes from that place of resentment. Or that he finds his dad's own mistakes and limits quite triggering, and he might be critical of his dad in certain situations for making the wrong choice or making a mistake. Or Mansi might find that she's unconsciously pushing her partner away, her husband away. That over time there's that kind of sense of shame and upset that's not quite being seen or allowed, means that if she gets too close to him, that's all going to blow up and be revealed. So she has to keep him at arm's length so she can maintain that disconnect from him, which is what's enabling her to kind of suppress these emotions. And that feels really uncomfortable for them both. They can tell there's something not quite right here. It doesn't feel good to be at a distance. But that's what this kind of mechanism tends to do. And you can see the reason why we repress these emotions. It's very innocent. No one's really doing it on purpose. It happens very automatically because it feels like acknowledging how we feel is going to be really threatening for the relationship. And that if even acknowledging it to oneself, not even telling the other person, just even acknowledging, oh, actually, I feel ashamed of my husband, or I feel upset with my husband, or acknowledging, actually, I feel really resentful of my father. Even acknowledging to that oneself can feel like it's somehow, I guess, bigger than it is, really. We tend to view these emotional parts of ourselves as like absolute truths. It's like if I feel resentful towards my dad, that means that's a kind of permanent, absolute thing. Now I just hate him. And I can't love him as well. Or Mancy's shame. It's like, if I feel ashamed of him, that means he's bad always, and I'm always going to be ashamed of him, and that's just a permanent thing. So there's no way I can have that. So we can't let that out the bag. But actually, emotions are much more flexible and malleable. If we actually just feel and acknowledge that shame, it actually tends to soften. And particularly if we can then there might create more space to talk to him, and there might be more understanding of each person's position. He might really understand his wife once she really is able to be more honest with him, and that might change his behavior. Or she might come to an understanding of, oh, I didn't realize debating for you was just like a game. It's not that serious. It's when these emotions are suppressed that creates everything gets stuck and feels really sticky. Whereas when we can be more honest, again, it's not always easy. It's painful. It's difficult. But there's much more fluidity in the relationship and much more openness. It's like a huge relief. It's like, you can feel the defenses. You can feel your body soften as the tension floods away. So that's the main reason we tend to, suppress these feelings. Is the way it threatens the relationship. It also feels contradictory. It's like, I love my husband, I love my dad. If I admit resentment or shame, then that's going to invalidate that somehow. And that's simply not true. We are, as I can't remember the poet now. He's very famous. He said, I am vast, I contain multitudes. That American Walt Whitman. We can hold all kinds of different parts. We tend to be very modular. We have a part that loves them. We have a part that hates them. We have a part that wants them to be this way. There's a part that loves them as they are. We've got all sorts of stuff going on. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to add up to one. You can be a contradictory bag of different things. That's beautiful. And in fact, we tend to become more and more whole the more of these divergent parts we actually meet and acknowledge. It's like, because if we don't admit to it, if we don't allow it, we stay fragmented. Whereas actually, when we start to welcome in these different feelings, they become more whole. We become more whole. Another important point is that we have this sense that, okay, I shouldn't feel this way. Like with Sam, he's like, I should be grateful. And with Mancy, it's like, oh, I should let him have his opinions. But we don't get to choose how we feel. This is a very important principle. We can only be honest about it. Mancy's feeling shame. Sam's feeling resentment. That's just how it is. They can either acknowledge it or not. And they're welcome not to. That's totally fine. They can do whatever they like, and so can you. But there will be these consequences of the difficulties and the stickiness in relationship until we start to acknowledge these parts. So I talked already about the consequences, how they can come out sideways. It also, when we don't feel these parts, they tend to feel more real. It's like the shame, when we're trying to push it down, it's wanting to come up. When the resentment's trying to come up, it feels more real the more we resist it. There's this saying, what you resist persists, which is so true. It's like it starts to feel more and more real. Those little things that Sam's dad does that trigger him, they'll feel more and more annoying and stir up more resentment the longer and he represses it. And what do you do then in this situation? So, like I said, the goal is not necessarily or is in fact not at all to act out these emotions. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that Sam should just start, yelling at his dad for, being too strict when he was a kid, or that Mancy should start, shaming her husband every time he starts acting in this way. that would be just going to the opposite end of the spectrum, which isn't too helpful. Instead, you want to head towards the middle way, which is just Sam and Mansi working through feeling, acknowledging, allowing these parts of them to be fully experienced. And I have a video called How to Feel Your Feelings, which goes into more detail on that. But essentially, it's just like acknowledging, okay, I feel resentment. Where do I feel that? Noticing the resentment in the body. Maybe letting it express, speaking from that part of him. I'm talking about Sam now. Speaking from that resentment. Letting it just getting radically honest about what it wants to say. Maybe it just wants to say, no, or I hate you, or go away. It could be all kinds of things that just need to be expressed. You know, if you allow these parts to express themselves, again, it's not an absolute. You can say, you can let a part of you say, I hate you. And think of it more as just like a little toddler. You know, when a toddler's upset with their parents, it just goes, I hate you. It just wants to, it's just trying to, it's a cry for love. It's a cry for help. And these parts of you are the same, the shame or the resentment or the fear. Let them cry themselves out fully, saying, I hate you and no, I don't want you to be there and go away, fuck you. In that, there's a relief that comes, and then all of that it's all water under the bridge, and you can suddenly say, oh no, actually, I don't hate them. I just needed to get that out. I just need to feel that, acknowledge that, let it through, and then you come to a cleaner. You see them more clearly. It's like, oh no, I do love them, of course. And then what you'll find is that as you acknowledge and feel the truth of the feelings, without feeling guilty or trying to rationalize it or saying I should be grateful or saying, I shouldn't feel this way. When those parts try to come in, just ask them to step aside for a moment. Just say, I hear you. You're a bit worried. Step aside for 5 minutes just while I feel this resentment or whatever it is. Because when you really start to allow these feelings to flow through, you're no longer perceiving that other person through this lens of that feeling. There's a cleaner and clearer relationship that you have. It feels less sticky. You feel lighter. They don't trigger you as much. Because all that stuff that was being triggered was all the stuff that you were holding in and holding back and not acknowledging. Again, out of complete innocence, out of total innocence. But it nevertheless was still having an impact. Gabor Mate, who's this trauma expert, he has this sort of phrase I heard him say once that was really helpful. He says, if you have a choice between feeling guilty and feeling resentful, choose guilt every time, because the resentment will eat away at you. He's talking in particular about when we tend to suppress our needs and so on in regard to another person. Like you really don't want to go to someone's wedding. And you know that if you go, you'll be really resentful of them because you're just exhausted. You need some time to yourself. Your kids have been running you ragged. And now you've got this invitation to this wedding that you feel obliged to go to, but you absolutely don't want to go to it. If you don't go, you'll feel guilty. But if you do go, you'll hate them. You'll resent them. And that resentment is so much more corrosive than the guilt. And the same goes for these feelings. That's like allowing the resentment, acknowledging the resentment. And then if you feel a little bit guilty, that's definitely the preferable option. So a thought for how you can go about this, there's many ways, but you could start to just journal and just, put the name of the person at the top of the page and just start to write down getting as radically honest as you can. Write down how you feel about that person. Maybe there's specific situations that you wanted to write about where that made me feel like this. That made me feel really angry when you did that. That made me feel really upset when you said that to me. And just starting to notice, as you're writing, notice what's happening in your body. Notice if you feel those emotions, the fear or the anger or the shame or the sadness or whatever it might be. And that can be start of your way in. And again, remembering that you don't have to do it right. It doesn't have to add up. It doesn't have to make sense or be reasonable, like as if you're in a conversation with them. Because when it comes to expressing our emotions to other people, we tend to formulate it in a very certain way. It's like, hey, I just wanted to share something. When you did this, it made me feel a little bit like that. When journaling, it should be just like raw toddler level, just the raw expression of like, no, just go away. You're just writing that on the page. It's just the raw expression that you wouldn't say that to someone, but it's got to come out in the raw way. And then once you've processed it through, then you can go talk to them if you want And then because it might be necessary, once you felt these emotions, it might be necessary to go and have a conversation with that person, if they have the capacity to meet you there, which is not always the case. So you don't always have to have that, go out and talk to the other person, because often other people don't have the capacity to be as honest as you might do, be as vulnerable as you might do. And it's going to be, and it's just going to make things worse if you try and confront them or talk to them. But you've got to make a judgment call for yourself on that one. Whew, good. I do help people with this, to feel their feelings. So I've got some one-on-one slots available. You can check out my work in the description and how I work with people and so on. Hope this helps. See you later.